Washington is a mess. The country is right now claiming to be enjoying great prosperity, but there's something wrong in the country. And why is there so much hatred and animosity in spite of the fact that, the statistics do look pretty good. We still are the wealthiest country in the world. But we're not probably the freest country anymore. And if you look at it, you'd have to say, in what direction are we going? We're moving in the wrong direction. We're less free now than we were 20 years ago. We're certainly a lot less free than we were before 9/11. Something terrible happened after 9/11 because all of a sudden the correction was put more rules and regulations and laws on the American people, and it was supposed to solve all our problems. But the country is, I think, in a big mess. In a way, I think it's bankrupt. It's bankrupt economically. We're totally broke when you look at it. Yeah, there's $21 trillion. That's a lot. But what about the $210 trillion that you're inheriting? You have to deal with it. Of the financial obligations, the unfunded obligations, it's huge, and it's growing exponentially. But the philosophy hasn't changed. It's the same as it's been for a long time. They follow Keynesian economics. I'll tell you what, if you think that you can tinker around and change and get better managers of Keynesian economics and not accept, Austrian economics, believe me, it's a dream. You have to accept the principles of the free market and Austrian economics and totally reject all the principles of Keynesian economics. This would mean that you'd have to change some major things. First, you have to repeal 1913. 1913. That would be a start. And of course, if you repeal 1913, which was a major calamity for our Constitution, then the other thing we should get people only to go to Washington that they have to have at least a third grade reading ability because the problem with the reading the Constitution, it's not that complex. It just tells you what the government's allowed to do, and the rest you're not allowed to do it. If it's not there, you can't do it. That shouldn't be that complex. Prohibited, we're allowed to do it. No, that's not the way it is. If they don't give you permission to do it, and if you don't have the authority to do it, you're not allowed to do it. And Article 1, Section 8 is a pretty important part of the Constitution that tells you the 19 or 20 things that we're allowed to do in Congress. Now, that isn't followed. It doesn't matter because we have been influenced now for nearly 100 years from a movement frequently referred to as a progressive movement. I don't know of very much good that has come from the progressive movement. I think we need to repeal the progressive movement. Accounting and then work for the IRS, I don't want you to have a job. I'd like to make sure you've got a job available for you. So we wouldn't have an IRS, we wouldn't have an income tax, and guess what? If we did that and we repealed 1913, we wouldn't have that very mischievous organization that commits fraud and counterfeit every single day, and that is we get rid of the Federal Reserve. Did not forget. That's good. But they have a few more in Washington now thinking along these terms. But this is the reason that YAL is so important to keep these issues alive. Understand that the organization does work now specifically with candidates, maybe at state levels and all. And like I said, I don't have that much confidence in politics, but if you're doing it, you have to know the person you're working for is going to stick to their guns and not be changed when they get up there. Too often, that's what happens. They go and immediately they try to change you. So I think if you see politics that way, that was the only way I could justify in my own mind that I could go there, because people say, well, you didn't accomplish anything. How many bills did you get passed? I said, no, my main job was trying to stop them. Or we should be stopping, you know, whether it's stopping the tax system or the monetary system. But I'll tell you another area that we have a responsibility for, and this is another philosophy that you're inheriting. We have to deal with that, and that is the philosophy of perpetual war. We need to get rid of that and never allow our government to go to war without It's very easy to develop a philosophy of that. Once you say, yeah, why are we over there? Oh, defending our country. You know, the one thing that bugs me the most about this argument about why we're over there, we're fighting for our Constitution and we're fighting for our liberties by going over and fighting illegal, unconstitutional war and killing a lot of people and saying, oh, we're going to protect our Constitution. And people roll over and believe that stuff. Your job is going to have to be to convince these people, for the most part, nobody really cares. They just ignore it. But the people in leadership position, the people who will be influencing Washington, have to realize that that nonsense doesn't go. It's a bunch of lies about why we go to wars, and they're perpetual. I, of course, remember World War II. They did have a declaration, but since World War II, it's been a total disaster. And it's ongoing, and now it's done in more secret. It's actually going to get worse because of drones and all the things that they can kill people in other manners. But it's this whole idea that our government is the aggressor. Oh, you can't say that. That means you're unpatriotic. And one thing that pleased me during the campaigns was I took this position strongly. I said, bring the troops home. Get out of there. We don't need to be there. Typical Republican, conservative, and sometimes Christian audience, I got boos and hisses for saying that. But one thing, though, that sort of kept me going was when they added up the numbers, and I guess it was in '88, there were a lot of candidates involved, and when they did, they found out that I got more donations from the active military people than all the rest put together. And send people into battle because the military likes war. They might like a strong national defense. They might like the idea that you defend yourself if you're attacked. But this whole idea that people are sitting around there, well, when they're going to give us a war, I'm anxious to go to war. And governments aren't caused by the average person. They're not caused even by the troops. They're caused by government. Government policy causes the war. And that is the reason why we have to get control of the government and limit it. But if it wasn't just the government, way out of context of what they should be doing in a free society, is the fact that how could you argue, well, there's people in Iran and soldiers over there, and there's soldiers in the United States that have decided, why don't we start a war? We need to kill those 18-year-olds over there. We have 18 to 25-year-olds there, and they're looking to fight and kill people over there. It's totally insane. That's why the message has to get out to realize how ridiculous this is, so that people would come up and say, yeah, why are we doing this? I think we've made some inroads on this, you know, on the issue of war. One other war I think we've made tremendous progress on, that I got involved in many, many years ago, a long time before anybody would touch it, and that is getting rid of the war on drugs. Woo! person would say, that means you are going to legalize marijuana? Legalizing that? And I said, no, you missed the whole point. I want to legalize liberty. Anytime a government decides that it's in their government's interest to protect you from yourself, believe me, the ball game's over if you let them get away with it. That means you can decide, well, of course, we have a little bit of that now. We have spiritual decisions. Most of the time we try to recognize that you can have your own spiritual life. We don't want to regulate that. We're not a theocracy. And in the intellectual life, you can read the books. Of course, right now the biggest problem is the books you read in our government schools are so bad. But we recognize that too. But as soon as it comes to what you put in your bodies, we can put things into our head and our brains and our religion, which, you know, some of these philosophies are very authoritarian philosophy, very, very dangerous, so that we let people read about. Some of the religions can be very, very bizarre and dangerous. But it's almost absolute. The government has absolute control over what you put in your body, and they will tell you what you can and can't do. And in a free society, you can do what you want, and that means that whether it's spending your own money the way you want, or eating and drinking or carousing, as long as you follow one very important rule: don't mess around with other people, don't hurt other people, and don't take stuff from other people. And most people say, yes, I do believe that, but there's a limit, and they reject it on economic terms, because if we didn't do what we did, then the wealth would gravitate to the very wealthy, and the poor would get poorer. Well, what in thunder is going on?
What in thunder?
And 90% of the people are in the category, especially the lower 50%, who are really suffering. And the wealthy get wealthier, and they say, see, that's what capitalism did to it. But don't ever let them pull that on you. What we have today, matter of fact, I don't like the word capitalism, but if you say that free markets and freedom and decisions making will create what we have today, that just is not true. We don't have a balance in distribution of wealth, you know, the way it would be in a free society. Because if you look at the freest societies ever, especially the United States, which had the freest and the biggest middle class ever. Now that we have done what Mises said, don't do it. Do not destroy the value of your currency. You have to restrain government by not allowing them to print money and counterfeit the money. He says, if you destroy the middle class, if you do destroy your money, you will destroy the middle class. And that is exactly what happened. And all they do is that the people who are suffering now, especially when it comes from the left, you know, I don't have enough money. I can't even pay my grocery bill. So send me more money. And of course, it's just sending all this money in the first place that causes trouble. So they have trouble understanding that. But this is an economic education problem, and that's why I'm involved in economic education and with my curriculum, homeschooling, because ultimately that's what it's going to take. We have to change people's minds, and we have to change their attitudes. We have to change their understanding of economics. And eventually, a prevailing attitude of the people will reflect the government. Today, the prevailing attitude has been and still is predominantly preached by the universities. The universities are getting much worse. They're not getting better. All they teach about is cultural Marxism and the idiocy they want to because we still have a little bit of liberty left. And they're trying to say that the Libertarian Movement, the Tea Party movement, and Ron Paul, they're all gone. It's over and done with. They just lost it, and we don't hear anything else about it. I wonder why they're always pestering me and trying to regulate my distribution on Facebook and Google if they don't think we exist. Believe me, the most encouragement I ever get for knowing that the freedom movement is alive and well is when I come and visit YAL. crowds out, and socialists are now running. Yes, that's what you hear, but guess what? 99% of what you hear, you know, on television and newspapers and all that are all going to be biased. But when I look out and see some problems, I think of you and a group like this and what you're doing. Because you come at different levels, maybe some new people here, and some came 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And believe me, it isn't like everything is known to you immediately. The principles can be like a light bulb and turn it on, but figuring out how to answer the questions. Well, how do you do this? What happens about the people who are making $1 an hour and they're not able to live on it? Does that mean you need the government to, you know, pass a law and give them $2 an hour or whatever? So you have to know how to answer that. So in time, you have to learn how to present the case for liberty, because it's only through persuasion. Libertarians don't buy into this, you know, the use of force. The other side, they do. They believe in the use of force, money and power and politics and war, to force their ideas on people. But we have to do it through persuasion. But we have one advantage. We have the message, which is the truth about how society should work. Is something that has gone on for a long time. And I like to sometimes think about the history of the universe. You know, our universe and our constellation has been available about 34 billion years. And our history, human history, is maybe 6,000 or 7,000 years old. If you take all of the existence of what we know, we've been around for a few seconds. And yeah, just think of what's happened in those few seconds. I mean, a lot of good stuff and a lot of evil stuff. But most of the stuff has occurred here in the last couple hundred years. You know, I think our revolution had a lot to do with it. I think the Industrial Revolution had a lot to do with it. I think individualism, which was taught in Christianity, had a lot to do with it. And the Industrial Revolution created great wealth and raised standard of living of so many people, and it still does. Just think of all that we have. But the tragedy is that about half the time or more, that technology goes to fighting wars. How many times, you know, how much money goes into developing weaponry? And why, if the human race has made progress these last couple of hundred years, even in the standard of living, why haven't we made any progress in getting along with each other and understanding human nature? And therefore people say, well, that's human nature, it can never change. I happen to believe that things can change. I mean, a couple hundred years ago, who would have I remember my dad talking about, you know, the first automobile he saw and the first airplane. Back then, and they said, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen. Nobody would have believed it. It would have been bizarre. But when you talk about people getting along together and living differently and having different principles, like, oh, that's impossible, we have to have more weapons, and that's the only thing that will take care of it. I happen to believe that if you think in those terms, there's no reason why you can't work in that direction, in that civilization can advance by bringing people together socially and operating that way. And you know, it's not like we don't know what to do. The message has been around a long time, and nobody has a monopoly on it. Most of the great religions recognize this basic rule. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't hurt people, and don't kill. You know, and that's been endorsed in that you don't have to be a theologian to figure out, but it's very practical. No lying, cheating, stealing, killing, hurting people. If people would just say, well, that does sound good, I don't want people to do that, would it be a perfect world? Far from it. There's still going to be a problem, because I don't think you have utopia just by saying that. But if they know what the rule is, and do you accept this rule? And that's more or less what I'm sure most of you have accepted to come to a group like this. You're not pushing and accepting the whole notion that government is force and should be used. Now, Bastiat describes this so well. He said, if you and I can't do something, if we want something from our neighbor and we want to go and take it from them, most people still say that that is not a nice thing to do. We shouldn't do that. But It's perfectly okay, philosophically and morally, to rig the system, the political system, destroy the Constitution, and tell the government, hire the guy with the gun, the IRS gun, and send him over there and tell him, I want your stuff, and then get it delivered. That is the problem. Even back to Hammurabi and the early days of just organization, one of the reasons why they organized was trying to make the king live under the same laws the people had to do. And we've drifted from that. Just look at our judicial system right now. I think that is a horrible mess on what's going on. How can we trust the Justice Department? How can we trust our security agencies? And yeah, the NSA, they really helped us. The TSA, they really made sure I didn't get hurt here. I'll tell you what, it's way, way out of control. And people should realize that there is a different answer, but you have to recognize this basic principle. This idea, first, that the government can tell you, keep you from, and protect you from yourself, so they regulate your whole life. And also that the natural consequences of freedom is that only the rich will have stuff and the poor will be worse. It's not true. There's no point in history. I personally have a belief that if I had something to do with promoting a free society, and I lost everything and everybody lost everything, but tomorrow we had a free society, I would do it even if you ended up with a lower standard of living, which is not true. You get a higher standard of living. But I value my liberty so much that I think it's much more valuable than just getting a higher higher income or something. But we don't even have. That type of decision. The Victor Hugo had made a statement that armies can't stop ideas, and I think that is true. You can stop an army, he said, with another army. They're stoppable. But if you have an idea whose time has come, armies can't stop it, and that is important. But the power of ideas is something that you're dealing with. You're dealing with something unique in history. History is short, very short. And just think, most of recorded history is not too very old. If I just go back and listen to what my dad said, he was born at the beginning of the last century. And so much has occurred. But even in this very short century, think of what's happening. But also think about all this technology. Some people, including members of my family, they love Facebook, communications and this sort of thing. But look at the things that can come of it. So there's always the good and evil of some of this technology. But the technology has been fantastic. It's the use of it because people have not thought about a moral principle that we should use, to guide us. So this is something that I think that we all should pay attention to. That we need to know where we stand, where we were, and what our founders taught, what the Constitution means, and what are our goals. A lot of some people say, well, let's just leave town, let's move out. I've never really considered that. I've considered, well, I don't want to do that. It doesn't make sense. But I did want to do something to try to make it a better place. And there's a bit of frustration because there's been too much acceptance that the government and accept the notion that the government owns us. The income tax is based on the assumption that they own you. They own your life, and what you produce is theirs until they allow you to keep a certain percentage. So that's an ownership, and that has to be rejected. There's another item which represents ownership by government, and that's the military draft. They have registered our 18-year-olds. They all know where all the 18-year-olds are, and they come and get you. And so far we haven't needed it or wanted it in a good many decades. And yet they want it there. It's discipline. And I think that's what the TSA is all about, discipline and letting you know who is boss and putting controls on individuals. But no, your life is your own. It should belong to you with responsibility. But it's not always going to be perfect. The individuals who say, yep, I like this idea of keeping what I earn. But what if it doesn't go well? What if nature or something else happens, or you don't do as well, or make a bad investment? You can't, or you get sick because you abused your body by putting things in your body you shouldn't have. You can't go to the government and say, bail me out and take care of me and steal it from somebody else. You have to assume responsibility. I think it's going to come to a climactic end. I think that there's a lot of talk now about, you know, civil war and civil strife, and I worry a bit about it because there's so much hate. It is worse, and yet on the surface it doesn't look like there's enough justification. So I see it as part of what's going on in our universities, and cultural Marxism and all of these things are building it, but there's a lot of hate. Well, hate is the opposite of love. Maybe a little bit more love might cancel out some of that hate. Climax of this will, who knows what it will be exactly, but I think it very well could be economic, which would affect you, because this week I was talking about what's going on, and that is that the way we're moving in our economic and our monetary system is, I think, the inflation is going to come, and if inflation is there, the government lies to you. They constantly lie to you. There is a lot of inflation. People's standard of living goes down constantly. So I think the inflation is going to get much worse. The economy will totally weaken because everything is based on debt. And there will be a point where the debt will be rejected, and we have antagonized too many people around the world that would like to see us suffer, and we throw our weight around, whether it's military. We only have two policies overseas. Republicans and Democrats do the same thing. They go to a country and they say, this is what we want from you. Okay, we'll do it. Oh, we'll send them money, a bunch of money, and they're our client, so we take care of them. If they don't do what we say, or they quit doing what we're saying, we bomb them. I think there should be another foreign policy, and that is non-interventionist, mind our own business, be willing to talk to people, work with diplomacy, and look to ourselves for our shortcomings. Because this whole notion about somebody maybe interfered in our elections, maybe not, but I don't think it was the end of the world. But it's something they all have done. They've been doing it for a long time, and they'll probably continue to do it. But who's the champion of interfering? Guess what? You happen to live in that country. You know? There have been 80 coups participated by the United States since World War II. And there's been a lot of assassination of other leaders. It's a terribly tragic history that we have. So when we're perfect, then I think we can go along and tell the world we are exceptional. Well, it wouldn't be necessary. If we became a little more exceptional, like we were at one time, people will want to emulate us. But you can't use force and intimidation and say you're going to do it our way. But we have a long way to go on that. For instance, this whole stirring up with Russia, just looking for a Cold War. But of course, who benefits from a Cold War? Like the military-industrial complex. What happened there? Well, we were deep into the coup that threw out an elected leader and stirred up all that trouble and then moved NATO to the borders of Russia. So you have to, there's a lot out there, and I look at this stuff every day. Sometimes it gets complex, who's doing what to whom. But I'll tell you what, I see it from my viewpoint is that we do way too much, we get involved in too many places, that we stir up too much animosity toward us, and that we have a special benefit that allows us the advantage of putting on sanctions and fighting these wars, and that is that through the Federal Reserve and through the monetary system, We have the reserve currency of the world, and it ain't gold. It's just fiat. It's just printed money, and people they're still accepting it, but not so much anymore. And that will end. The Russians would like to have it quit. The Chinese would like to have it quit. The Indians would like to quit. And this will end. And that will be when we will have to live within our means. We will have a lower in our standard of living. Because right now our standard of living is maintained or increased for a certain group all through this fiction. The fiction that you can create wealth by creating money, and that the people we send to Washington are smart enough to know how to run your life and run the economy. And I have always said that, you know, I wanted to be president, not so much of what I wanted to do, but for the things I didn't want to do. I wanted to be president, so I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't want to run your life. That's it. Decision, I just have to follow my rule. But what about the economy? How can I run the economy? I don't know how to run the economy. The people should run the economy. And your question, I want you to pretend I can run the economy. And then when it comes to foreign policy, what right do I have, constitutional moral right do I have to preach and say that we're perfect and we're going to tell you how to run your country? And I would say, I don't have any right. So I don't want to run your life, I don't want to run the economy, I don't want to police the world. Oh, we don't want you for president. We want somebody that's willing to do stuff. You know? But anyway, it's a wonderful effort that you make. It's a wonderful thing what YAL is doing. And because this is where the action is. It's both philosophic and political action. Just remember, always check out those guys you support, because they sometimes will fail. Campaigns or education or whatever. So I remain optimistic. I think that in spite of all these problems, that we have made great progress. Just think, 10 years ago, nobody was talking about the Federal Reserve and the war on drugs. Nobody had put a dent in the war on drugs. People weren't as interested in privacy now, and they are. And guess what? The government is on the ropes right now. How many people want to go through the ropes for our CIA and our FBI and the NSA and all TSA? No, they're not doing any favor. Let's go to the mats for fighting for our liberties and getting people to understand it so that we can feel good about assuming responsibility for ourselves. Thank you.
President Paul, President Paul, President Paul, President